Hello everybody, my name is Jost, and the title of my presentation today is Are Montana State Parks Educational and Interpretive Programs Effective? I'm going to start out by telling you a few statistics to kind of set the stage and kind of understand what the state parks are looking like in Montana. So Montana has 55 total state parks, and the majority of those state parks hold educational interpretive programs every year. For the last 2 years, at 3 separate state parks, Salmon Lake State Park, Placid Lake State Park, and Beavertail Hill State Park, they had some staggering numbers that I was able to research and find out. So in the summer of 2017, there was a total of 9 interpretive programs with a wide-ranging view of topics that presented themselves at those 3 state parks. 294 total people attended those parks throughout the summer, which comes to an average of 32 people per program. And now this is information I got from americalearns.net, which is a data resource website for interpretive programs in the state of Montana. Now to me, that number is huge. 32 people per program for a span of, a couple months in the summer? Some of those programs, like for instance, there was a program at Placid Lake State Park on August 26, 2017. That program alone saw 108 people attend a program held by a company in Montana called Animal Wonders that was presenting on an animal adaptation program. There was also a program held at Placid Lake State Park earlier in the summer, I believe sometime in July, that only saw 9 people attend a program on the history of the 1800s early life in Montana and how the state became a state. So as you can see, the programming topics that run through the state parks in Montana have a wide range of topics, themes, and stuff that people might enjoy. Some of them are going to see huge numbers. Some of them are going to see smaller numbers. So how do we determine if they are effective or not? So today in my presentation, I'm going to kind of run through what is interpretation. What makes an effective interpretive program? I'm going to also talk about some case studies that I was able to research, review some of the literature that's written on interpretation, specifically focusing on Sam Ham, who I think we all know is a huge leader in interpretation in this field. And then we're going to kind of wrap up the presentation on some of the future concerns and issues that sustaining a successful interpretive program might have in the state of Montana, and some recommendations that I kind of would believe that are important to be able to have more success and be more effective in the future. So let's start out with what is interpretation. Interpretation serves a purpose. Interpretation is organized, is enjoyable, is thematic. Interpretation is relevant and relatable. It makes a difference for the people. Now, this is information that was taken from the National Association for Interpretation Certified Interpretive Guide Training Book in 2012. When researching interpretive programs at the parks that I studied at Salmon, Placid, and Beavertail Hill over the summer, was the core elements. These core elements that we just discussed were very present. You want to make sure there's a relevant and relatable topic for people to be interested in. They want to enjoy themselves when they come to a state park. They want to learn something. They want to leave with more of a heightened curiosity of their own. These parks that I studied do that. They build a skill for you. They teach you how to fish, and they teach you the history of Montana, and they bring in animals so you can understand how animals adapt to different climates in different areas of the world. It's not just a jumble of facts being spit at you left and right. You want to make it thematic and enjoyable for people so that they understand more about something, and that it kind of already sparks their curiosity. And so when they leave your program, they leave better. They leave more connected to the resource and connected to parks themselves. So I'm gonna go on to a quote, or so I've studied the state parks of Montana, and their mission is to preserve and protect our state's heritage and the natural beauty of our public lands for the benefit of our families, communities, local economies, and out-of-state visitors. Our objectives are to provide excellent land stewardship, public safety, and service through recreation, innovation, and education. Education and interpretive programs is a form of recreation. People want to come to state parks to have fun. They want to come and they want to fish and they want to camp. But if we give them that added recreational outdoor leadership in steward and conservation work to make them connect more to our land and to our topics, I think that's what we need to focus on. So I'm gonna start out by talking a little bit of some of the literature that I researched in this project. A quote from Sam Hamm from his book, Interpretation, Making a Difference on Purpose. He simply states, interpretation is simply a form of communication. There are tons of forms of communication, and interpretation is a very important and a very effective one to connect with somebody on a personal level and on a more grander scale level. During my time researching these topics on if these programs are effective in the state of Montana, I kind of took two different case studies. I studied the programming that's held at the parks Salmon, Placid, and Beavertail Hill State Park, and I compared them to the parks, or to the programs at the park of Lone Pine State Park, which is in a different region, a different demographic, a different geography, lots of differences in people that are coming to programs and differences in what they're going to be interested in. And so one of the things that they do at Lone Pine to determine if their programs are effective is they do lots of surveys, lots of questionnaires per program to get feedback from their visitors on if a program is effective or not. And so at Lone Pine State Park, they give out these surveys to teachers who bring their students from different schools around the area to Lone Pine to learn different things. And they stated that some of their most important core aspects of what they teach in their school curriculum, they want to also be taught in the park, so it kind of all molds together. So some of those core elements is they want to make sure that what they're teaching them in the school is the same as what they're learning in the parks. And according to AmericaLearns.net, 73% of the teachers surveyed stated that the core elements of what they teach in the class are very similar, and they hit on the same things that they were teaching and that they were going through at Lone Pine. So that's a high. I think that's almost 75%, 73% saying like that effective programming at the parks is the same kind of educational stuff that they teach in the schools. So that, I believe, answers one of our questions. Are these programs effective? Yes, teachers are filling out surveys saying that their students are being taught the same thing in the parks that they're being taught in the classroom. So that's one form of trying to figure out if programming is effective or not. And in my other case study in Placid, Salmon, and Beavertail Hill State Parks, it's more of like, we don't do surveys there. They did just more of like an attendance-based number counting and more of like a one-on-one talking to attendees of programs and trying to figure out if the program that we're being brought are of interest and are effective for people to learn and stuff like that. And so some of the statistics in 2016, there were a total of 286 total people who attended programming over 10 different programs throughout that year. And what we talked about earlier, in 2017, there was 294 people for 9 programs. So those averages and those numbers are almost spot on from one year to the next year. Why is that the case? Is it the topics of the programs? Is it the marketing that the people in the parks were doing to get people to attend programs? I think it's all the above. So in the future, for Montana State Parks to be able to continue to have effective programs, I believe some of the future issues and concerns are going to be the funding, the infrastructure, and the staffing of these parks. As I don't know if I mentioned this earlier or not, but 55 total state parks in Montana with a budget that does not support the parks, let alone support the ability to be able to bring better programs year by year and be able to have the staffing and the infrastructure to be able to supply that for the public. So I believe that my recommendation for Montana State Parks, in order to continue to have an effective educational interpretive programming schedule throughout various state parks, is to be able to allocate and separate a specific budget for their educational needs, have adequate infrastructure on the ground building areas in the parks to be able to house these. Some of these programs that I was witnessing in like at Placid Lake State Park, for instance, just held in like a grass field with some tables. Like that's fine, that works, but sometimes people want to have more of a grander feel and at least have some sort of amphitheater or some sort of designated area that programs can be held at. Being able to allocate some funding for specific interpreters to be able to be there for people to be able to develop programs, to have the means to be able to work with different organizations, have some money to bring in bigger and better and stuff, to be able to reach even farther out different areas, to be able to bring even more people into the park, to be able to teach them different types of things and topics and stuff like that. So in the case of so we're going to kind of wrap up this conversation today by just talking about what is an interpretive program. It is a relevant and relatable program and topic source that connects people to the resource, lets them leave the park or leave wherever setting that they're at with a more heightened curiosity for a subject, to where that they'll either come back with more questions or go off and maybe do their own research and their own find out further their own interests. Effective programs let people enjoy themselves. So to conclude our presentation today, I'm just going to kind of go backwards and kind of explain again what did we talk about today. What is interpretation? Interpretation is a relevant and relatable form of communication that will connect people to the resource and allow them to have a further curiosity for our natural world in various forms of communication. What makes an effective program? How do you determine if it is effective? There's different tools for that. Like we discussed at Lone Pine State Park, they do surveys. They get on the ground and ask the people that are attending their programs, please fill this survey out and let us know how we're doing. Are these programs effective? Are they in line with what you're teaching in the schools in different mediums to be able to educate people? What do your attendance numbers look like? What programs bring in more people? What programs don't bring in more people? What do people want to know? What do they not want to know? So we talked about two different case studies that I researched. One at Lone Pine State Park and one that accompanied Salmon Lake, Placid Lake, and Beavertail Hill State Park. Two different regions of Montana, two different demographics, management styles, different types of parks, different things that people attend those parks for. Both those parks and both those areas of research showed that those state parks run effective programming. They have tons of people at the programs. They have tons of positive feedback. We reviewed some literature on the topic of interpretation. Sam Hamm, essentially the father of interpretation, talks about it's a form of communication, connecting with somebody, getting on their level of understanding and letting them go forward after your presentation, after they've attended something, and to develop their own thoughts, their own curiosity on the subject. I discussed on what I personally think the future concerns are for state parks in Montana and how to be able to maintain an effective interpretive program. They need better funding and budget. They need better park infrastructure, and they need staffing personnel to be able to bring these programs going forward year by year in the future. So that's kind of concluding all of the main points of the presentation today. Thank you so much for coming. Again, my name is Jacob Jost. Bye-bye.